So this presentation is based on my own research with my colleagues in several countries over the last, like I said, 10 years or so, and trying to accumulate my findings and views on how these two topics relate to each other. I will start at the circular economy end and try to lead it to the innovation system aspect and what I think are the opportunities for Arctic regional innovation systems in trying to build up strong systems for circular economy innovations. And where maybe a little bit about where are the biggest barriers and problems at the moment. Just for those who don't know me, the two pictures there are actually from the farm I come from in Northern Iceland. So as you can see, I come from the polar circle. And at the moment I am at the polar circle in Norway. So I lived most of my life in peripheral regions. And the research this is based on is from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, and Iceland. And many would claim that Luxembourg isn't peripheral, sitting in the middle of Europe, but in some ways it is actually peripheral because of country borders and the small ecosystems they have there. So this is kind of the building blocks of my lecture. So starting with circular economy for sustainability and trying to bring it together into the innovation system aspect. So where do I stand? We all know that Kircher and his colleagues, they found well over 200 definitions for circular economy, but they also did a brilliant analysis. And what we find is that not only academia, but also firms very, very often focus mainly on waste management and maybe the 3 R's. But let's not forget that even in the 3R system, the reduce or use less aspect is hardly mentioned. So the 3 R's framework is in practice too. I'm not that keen on the R system anymore because I'm not sure if you realize, but over 60 R's have now been defined for circular economy. And it is also the problem with it that this is about circular activities. I'll come back to that later. On the other end, we have the definitions that go for system level change, and there are quite a few good ones. One of them is actually defined by Kircher and his colleagues from original version in the 2017 paper, and then again in the 23 paper. This is where I stand, that there is no reason to try to keep on doing the same mistake. In many ways, the policy for sustainability as a tool for driving sustainable change failed. And it failed because sustainability is the big long-term ideas. It's like a religion. You have to be good to everybody. You have to live a perfect life defined by a given religion. It has worked well as a marketing tool for religions for a few thousand years. I don't think that current society is a good advertisement for that it has been a success. So people are flawed, systems are flawed, and so having these long-term goals as the driver for change doesn't seem to work very well for us. What we need is a tool that is closer. But let's see how this is actually working at the moment. What we see is that most companies, most regions, most supply chains have started to do some circular aspects, but it tends to be the low-hanging fruit, which makes perfect sense. That's where you start. But a lot of companies, even in Norway, are still focusing on changing to renewable energy and then focusing on waste management, specifically recycling, which we know is the least effective of all circular tools. On the other end of using less or completely changing how you think and design the things you do is very, very little. So what the systemic version of circular economy is also is on the other hand looking at is trying to maximize the efficiency and the use of material and energy flows, lowering pollution and toxicity, hardly spoken about in many industries, and also the use of natural resources, including land itself, water, and specifically sea, and being in Norway that wants to be a leader in deep sea mining, I'm quite concerned about that aspect of our picture here. So how does this connect? So I explained to my students and have defined for myself that we have two levels. And I think we need to be more specific about this. Not every circular activity is circular economy. And that is because activities are often just put into a linear economy without any major adjustments to the system. They are individual loops, and they do not automatically lead to more circular businesses. Circular economy, on the other hand, is a system level, and that is a very simple explanation, and that is that economy in itself is a man-made system of how we connect things, evaluate things, and connect them. And this is the level we need to be looking at much, much more than we do today. So this is also the link to the laws and regulations and the whole industries and value networks. And we know that in circular economy research, so framed, most of the attention has actually been on individual circular activities or how they are working, not working, drivers, barriers, and so on. But there is a very big part of the literature that is actually writing about individual technological development and supposed measured circular activity effect of that. There is a huge lack of system level, and any system level, from measurements that measure system level change. There is a huge call now for three different categories of EU horizons for trying to get calls in for developing this type of system level measurements. And this is also at industry level, at value chain level, and so on. So, and if we look at it also from a regional point of view, we are in the very, very early stages of doing it. And sadly, the measurements we are using are often to focus on that are very often numbers on waste collection, and recycling efforts. Mainly because those are the existing and reliable numbers to work with. But what is it then that we want to look at? Well, one of the ways circular economy has been using is trying to put the focus on the micro, the meso, and the macro levels. Traditionally, this has been done rather obviously as being that micro is individual companies, meso is eco-industry parks and the flows that they create within the park, that is a local system or closed system, and the macro level is at industry, supply chain, region. I am currently working on a paper where I'm redefining this a little bit because I don't think it fits with the current happenings in industries that I have been looking at in my research. And so firstly, the micro level is individual activities, maybe more than firm level, because at firm level, you can't start being really circular without including the supply chain. And there is a clear research from multiple papers that you can't be more circular than your supply chain. And that is both upstream and downstream. the meso level needs to go outside of the industry parks. It needs to take on a supply chain level, because we are thankfully increasingly seeing developments of material flows, specifically with side streams and leftover materials that are happening in an industry park type of a way, but also out in the wild, outside of the parks. So this is a huge development and one of the big things happening here in my local region. But my favorite example that I will get back to later is from the fisheries in Iceland, where the side streams on a national level for cod are now more valuable than the cod fillet, which the wealth of Iceland has actually been built on. So at the macro level, we are talking whole industries. We are talking supply chains, or more closely maybe with value chains, whole regions. So the full-blown system level, where the meso is kind of an in-between. It's system level light maybe. So it's a limited system where you can start the processes. And I'm combining this based on a model built by Gutso et al. With the ideas from Glückler and Lenz from 2016 of the combination between institutions and the activities in companies. And this is that we need the bottom-up and top-down activities. So the formal institutions, the informal institutions, and then the bottom-up activities built and processes built within companies by individuals in groups of people as social practices, and they kind of meet in the middle for knowledge and institutions for change. Because as long as companies and actors, decision-making actors, don't have knowledge of circular economy and what is possible, they don't have a kind of opportunity space in their head. What could we actually be doing? We will not see much of a change. So we really, really need to focus on both ends of the spectrum and create forums, create activities where these actors can meet in the middle to create a space to build up this type of a knowledge. And this is a key factor, in my view, in building up peripheral innovation systems like we have in the Arctic. And I have some results from my research here in Mo i Rana relating to this. So from my research in companies in multiple Nordic countries, this is what we are finding. We have I would explain it that we have a continuum between linear and circular rather than you're either or. I don't think that is how the life works in general. So we have a linear thing where we have from completely linear, but it starts with these limited individual loops, the circular activities that for me are not circular economy, but they are the roots, they are the seedlings that might become something more. This is where individual companies start doing small things. They start building up the idea that maybe they should go further. The bright and good news for me today is that brand new survey is showing that regardless of Trump and his government, a lot of big industries in the US are still keeping on their track on doing circular changes, and they are not drawing back. So let's see how long they can do that, but at least that was my yes type of a news for the day. So this type of activity is mainly internal in the company, and they have internal collaboration. So within the departments and activities of the firm, it's usually very, very limited outside of the company. And these are incremental innovations by the most part. So at the meso level, in the middle, where we have starting of a circular economy. We are seeing starting of a more systemic view, but in early stages, we see that companies have started making changes to their business model. The important thing to notice, and this is results of my PhD student, Edda, is that this is not necessarily done on purpose. They don't themselves see it as being creating parts of their business model to be more circular. It is kind of a response to the circular activity that they are doing, the innovation, the change. They need to change how they deal with the supply chain, often upstream supply chain, in order to be more circular. This is a change in their business model, but not necessarily consciously done. But supply chain collaboration is usually one of the first stages we see. And this is where we start to see that a single innovation, mostly technological, so they do a project for some technological innovation with the explicit aim of creating something, making a circular change within the company. But it comes with bundles of innovation. It, as I was just talking about, it has this effect on the business model, but it also has effect on the messaging to their customers or downstream. It often has non-technological innovations they need in the company also for how they measure things, how they communicate within companies, and all kinds of other. So we need to start seeing other than the technological innovations. Hobson et al. Have in multiple papers ever since, I think their oldest paper, I remember them talking about this, is from 13 or 14, and it's to the newest papers from last year. They are talking about the lack of including other than technological innovations and including innovations in customer relationship and connections, because without a customer, circular innovation is not happening. I often talk to my students about the aspect of that a customer, regardless of it is an individual, me in the supermarket, or if it is a company, cannot choose a circular input, choose a circular product if you don't have access to them. They need to be there. So the customer is much more important than we sometimes give them credit for. And customer demand is a strong driver, which we know so very well from innovation research. So fully circular, I don't think it exists. I have still not found an example of a company, let alone a region or an area that is fully circular. I don't think it exists, and I'm not sure that perfect will ever exist. But that's not a reason to give up. Much better is much better than nothing, and perfect is not necessarily what we are aiming for here. But what we see is that we see companies that are working on system change. We are starting to see here whole supply chains, and I'm going to again come back to Icelandic fish. On that one, it is probably one of the most advanced such supply chains I've come across. And this is a combination. We need the combination of the value chain, so supply chain actors, but also the side actors that relate to the value chain, the public actors for the regulation, for the facilitation, for a lot of the building up of the innovation system, because we are quite dependent, at least in the Nordic countries, on public actors in helping us build innovation systems, and not the least in the Arctic regions. And we need constantly to include the customer. So we are starting to see this, and it makes it very, very interesting to follow over the next few years. So how do we connect all of this to innovation? Well, it starts with this. Yes, we talk a lot about technological innovation when it comes to circular economy, and it is a huge part of it. and it will be a huge part of the solution. But I sometimes feel, and I'm going to mention religion again, that for some people, almost on a religious level, it's the only solution, the only area we need to look at. And obviously that's not it. It's like reading news today. Everything is about AI. AI has solved this and that and everything. So we need to be skeptical. We need to open our eyes for the value of other type of innovation and how they actually facilitate and help us choose what is an innovation that is relevant from the technological, from the digital. Because let's face it, Scandinavians, we have a certain tendency to overcomplicate things. Just like we add a lot of extra things when we import EU regulations and make things stiffer and more difficult, strong traditions. I think we have gold in EU when it comes to this. And then it's the aspect of that in some ways you could also argue that this over focus on economic growth and technological development is part of what got us into the mess we are in today, with the global warming, the use up of materials and toxification in the broadest sense of the whole globe. So let's open our eyes and be more willing to take a better look at what other innovations are going to do for us. So let's start sometimes with taking a fundamental look at product and process design. So not start with what new can we do and how are we going to do it, but what would make sense if we try to take a fresh look at the system we have built up, at the process we have built up, and think of redesigning it. This has actually, in many cases, given very good results, because if you keep on developing the same product or line of products for a long time with endlessly adding on, you end up with something very complicated. My favorite example of this is from the automotive industry, your car. So I with my colleagues from Luxembourg, specifically Paula Hild, we did research on the car industry in Luxembourg, France, Belgium. So in this tri-area where there's a huge supply chain, and in Sweden. And one of the things that I got from so many of the interviewers, from this middle and top level management in their supply chain, is that the car industry is not trying to develop the most sustainable car. They are trying to take the car we already have and squeeze a little bit more. So the engineering expert companies, they will get from Volvo or any other, the example I have was about Volvo, that here is the carburetor from this car we are producing. We want you to get 1.5% better fuel use from this carburetor, and we want you to do it by adding digital solutions. That's it. That's the process most companies are doing. And this is the core difference between the automotive industry at the moment, between Europe and China, where China has been doing a much more end result focused redesign. So they are doing cars now that have started their life with, how can we make a car that fits current use as circular as possible from the start, from the design phase. And you can actually make quite circular cars by doing that. I'm not going to go deeper into this, but there is a huge difference in this way of doing things. We also need to have social innovation, both social innovation in the sense of within the company, because management procedures and communication between departments in bigger companies is one of the biggest barriers not talked much about in circular economy. My finding with my colleagues from both the automotive industry and the building industry, two of the most polluting, biggest footprint industries in Europe, shows that organizational structure and industry structure, the relationship between the big companies and the smaller ones, their supply chains and their networks, is one of the biggest barriers. So that is social and organizational innovation. We have talked about the business model innovation, that is about rethinking the whole value creation. What do we actually value? And this is another one of the big barriers. How often do we hear people, even before a project has been started or done any calculations, saying, but circular activities will always cost more. We can't afford it. I have a theory here that I haven't found the right research designed to test yet. So if anybody has a good idea, I'm all ears. It's that my observation indicates to me that there is a difference in the tolerance for payback time, for innovation cost, if it is a traditional technological innovation that rolls out in a product, or if the aim is more circular project, or create, regardless of it is the product itself or the process of creating it. In technological innovations, standard innovations, we see payback time tolerance that is in some cases several years. In circular focused innovations, it seems to be that it's about a year. So if even the price per unit needs to be higher, then there is no tolerance in many cases. And this, I think, is a social construction. This is about how we think about economy. So one of the reasons we need to take this up more and get better at including this in circular innovation projects is that we need to change the evaluation of the process. And here I think also that there is a big role to play if this is going to be part of a different system by the policymakers. So there is also a huge innovation process needed in policy. EU is doing a lot of things. There are a lot of projects going, but as we all know, EU is a slow-moving beast. And at the moment, what we are seeing is quite risk-averse behavior. But at the end, we need to start looking at circular innovation not as individual technological solutions, even if they play a big role. We need circular innovation bundles, because a successful circular innovation change needs to change how we use resources, how we create value, that is the business model, and how we do things, including how we use technology to make this process work as well as possible. And here, digitalization has a big role to play. So, and one of the areas we have hardly started doing research is the regional aspect, which is why I chose this as a focus of my talk today, and why I don't have endless solutions for it, but quite a few ideas. So why is it important to talk specifically about the Arctic? This won't take long. I think we all know this one. We have an area that is specifically sensitive. We are overrepresented in global warming, and the changes of sea and thawing of permafrost and other aspects mean that we are already experiencing more effect than most other parts of the globe, and we are in bigger danger of having it seriously disrupt activities, because on top of this, the Arctic has a very nature-based economy. We have three main areas of economic advantage: the minerals, the green energy aspects, and seafood in the widest understanding. But how does that link to innovation systems? Well, in the Arctic regions, we have innovation systems that are mainly built, and this is not just for the Arctic, notably, this is more or less everywhere in Europe at least. They are designed, developed for technological innovation, and not only all technological innovation, they are created for product and process innovations. Even service innovation is difficult in some Arctic areas. We though find there is a little bit of a development with that within the last decade or so. And that is because of the huge importance of tourism, at least in the two areas where I have done research on this. So in Iceland, it's absolutely clear this focus on service innovations is directly linked to tourism, and same to a degree in Denmark. Niels Carl, you can correct me in the chat if in the notes if you think I'm wrong on that one. But the rest of the Arctic, I don't have direct information about this, but I think there is a big chance it's similar. We also find that digital innovation is now getting more attention, and there are now here in Norway, they have recently started building up centers and aspects to try to support the innovation system for this. I know Finland and Sweden and Denmark moved earlier, but it's still not a hugely integrated part in some of the innovation systems. And then we have a big problem with the funding options. Innovation Norway is my only example here, because this is what I'm dealing with on everyday basis. Innovation Norway will only support innovation projects that have product or process innovation. They are very close to having the definition of this, that if it doesn't sound like it can lead to a patent or other IPR protection, then it is not fundable. So changing your innovation system or changing your business model to being circular, no. Project for a whole supply chain to come together and co-design a more circular system at a regional level was instantly denied with not enough innovation. And this was for a supply chain where we did not on a European level find another one that had already been redesigned to the level we were looking at. So this is a huge barrier here in Norway, where innovation is usually defined by the local actors. If you don't get external funding, it's not real innovation. It's just something integral local tinkering. And here we also come to the risk-averse aspect of policymakers for what is innovation and innovation implementation. And we really, really need to start to sell this idea of bundles of innovation. So at the moment, we have a mismatch between the circular innovation bundles and the changes in our systems. The systems are lagging behind. And this is a big problem because the opportunity space people are looking at is not developing fast enough. So we've now looked at some of the problems. So let's dig deeper into the problems. What are the cons? What is against? What are the specific challenges we have? Well, the Arctic mainly has the peripheral region, but on steroids in some cases. You all know this, the under the national level innovation levels. And I'm not going to start on how we measure innovation. The peripheral globe, as we are peripheral both nationally, but also globally, that gives us all kinds of problems, including problems relating to measurements and on government role in change. Because in Denmark, southern Denmark is very, very familiar with the far from Copenhagen syndrome, where government is constantly talking about how much southern Denmark actually costs them while it is the highest income region in many ways, with some of the biggest, best earning companies in Denmark. So there is a mismatch in the ideas. So on a global level, this is even worse. Last year, I was at a meeting with EU advisors that were defining and developing a measurement for regional connectiveness. And their idea was that you could actually use pictures, satellite imagery, to measure how connected the infrastructure networks or roads and rail was in a two-dimensional grid. And that's the measure of how advanced a region is. It took 3 seconds for my hand to go up. I pointed out that I'm Icelandic. I live in Norway. These two countries are nothing but fjords and mountains next to the fjords. There is no such things as back and forth connections. There is, in most fjords, there is one road. It's going in and out the fjord. And there is no other direction because of nature. So you really, really can't forget about geography here. And by the way, the two experts were geographers. So, and the meeting was a geographers meeting. We also have we mainly have smaller cities. There is a low level of agglomeration. We have long distances, and the institutional systems are thin. So we have quite a bit of things going against us. But I argue we also have relative advantages or pros. So yes, our innovation levels are under our national levels, but do you know what? We come from the countries with the highest national levels. The most peripheral regions in the Arctic Scandinavian countries are above EU average. So it's not that bad. We have to make sure that people are not over talking things down overly. We are high on digitalization. We have strong core industries with clusters that have been built up over the last 20, 25 years in most of the countries. We have the systems of local universities, or spread universities. I am sitting in a town with 50,000 inhabitants and a university department with local research. We also have what I call externally embedded experts. So our innovation systems have responded to the aspect of not having all experts. Here, we don't have an engineering department, but there is a long-lasting 25-year-old connection with NTNU. It's in a different region, but the long-lasting relationship has made that this external expert is actually embedded in our innovation system. There is a strong connection that makes that they are a very, very good second best for having your local system. National systems and the knowledge flows. We are really good at knowledge flows, and that is both internally between regions, and it's on a cross-border level. So what do we need to do? Look at the picture on the right. So the green regions are the strong innovation regions, and those are all the Arctic regions in the Nordic countries. So the most peripheral regions are strong. So regional policy, we need to take a look at regional policy and take a skeptical look at in what extent is the policy helping and hindering circular development. This includes aspects like regional organizations that are run at a regional level, but it's also for Innovation Norway and other funding opportunities. Here at my department, we have currently a legal researcher doing her PhD on circular economy barriers in the legal systems. So I'm full of hope that that will have effect. We need path development. We need to think about the changes of the industries and the supply chain as path development. because that's a line of literature where we have a lot of established tools, and it's a language that the policymakers, at least in some of the countries, really understand. Building industries sound much more politically viable and sexy than changing how we do things to be more nature focused. And we need to build up knowledge about circular economy and innovation systems. So we need to look at how we can build up level of collaboration on those aspects. We need to build up knowledge and opportunity spaces of the role of non-technological innovations, and specifically on supply chain development. Like here in my region, the companies here are using that they are in the same cluster as the industry park, where there is a very strong tradition for using the park to facilitate use of leftover materials. They are leading within Norway in that. And the methods and the way of thinking is now being actively developed to function outside the park. The barrier there is that we need somebody to be the facilitator, and that is the role that the ACT cluster has taken, actually. So they have built what I would call a community of transformation. So within the ACT cluster, there are several working groups where the companies participate voluntarily. One of them is the circular economy group. And when that one started in 2022, we had on about 10, 12 companies show up for every meeting. And most of them saw circular economy as just being a way to talk about waste. That was it. We had one or two bigger companies that had experts that had a much broader and stronger idea, but that was the exemption. After using this as a discussion model to input knowledge, and Hildrun, the one leading this, has been really, really good at getting companies from all over Norway, experts and so on. Now the actors are about 30 to 35 for each meeting. The meetings are more common based on demand. And most of the companies are now thinking much more holistically. They are thinking of circular economy as a system level change. They are talking about, okay, what do I need to do in my business model so that I can do this change to make as much impact as possible. And we are now working with an expert coming in on the evaluation and reporting. In other words, this has been used to build a space of knowledge and a community that has a common idea and expanded the opportunity level. And we are currently working with Innovation Norway of trying to get them to at least give it a go, that we doing projects. So how does all of this link to the fishing industry I've been promising? So clusters can also be this community of transformation as a whole, even if I took the example from Mo of the specific working group, the whole cluster is working on it. The Icelandic Ocean Cluster is another one. So we in Iceland now have that the cod that comes up of the sea is utilized. Over 80% of it goes to human consumption. And I'm talking about the whole thing. The skin, the eyes, the bones, everything. Everything comes ashore other than the gut. The liver and roe comes, but not the gut itself. There is an unsolved problem. We have companies with up to 99% use for human consumption. Most of it goes to high-level products. And how has that been done? Well, it has been done with the collaboration of the cluster that created a network of researchers, entrepreneurs, created a space of opportunity and knowledge space to create with funding that was created by the cluster. So they created their own funding and a network of funding operations that could support this, to create market for the side products. They have built whole new supply chains to deal with this. And the huge success history is the company Keratis that takes cod skin and makes it into medical plasters that have been globally accepted, including by the FDA. The company was in 23 sold for $1.3 billion. So their leftover that have been a problem can lead to huge opportunities. And I promise, this is the very last thing. This is me trying to sum up my ideas of how all these things come together. We need to take a look at all these actors. We have a little bit of a flow between the innovation actors themselves and the hopeful outcomes of circular innovation bundles. The facilitator here is the innovation system with all its actors and networks and layers. But as they are, at the moment, they are a bit problematic. They are limited. There is a lack of expertise in certain types of innovation, and specifically to see them as a combination of a bundle, even if there is a bit of expertise in how that fits together in service industry, specifically tourism. We also need a change in the politics level, the funding, and to use communities of transformation to input the innovation system itself, to develop the system. And I have an upcoming paper of a 25-year look at a development of an innovation system in Norway, including how communities of transformation have influenced this. And we need to do this in the Arctic context. We need to take a look at how can you take the strengths, the opportunities of the Arctic regions and create innovation systems that are based on what we can actually do, and stop doing this traditional aspect of looking at how are the innovation system in the brilliant big cities and define peripheral innovation systems mostly by what they don't have or what the central systems have. Because what the central systems have might not necessarily fit our situation. And secondly, most of it, there is no way it's possible to create. So let's stop this comparison. It's like me trying to fix that I'm not very good at basketball because I'm simply really not tall enough. There is nothing I can do about it by now. So let's change the view and look at what we have. And we have some advantages and we have loads of challenges. So I don't think I will have lack of opportunities or things to do over the next several years. Thank you.